How's your plague going, Johnson? Super herpes is great.
Welcome to the Close Enough Podcast with Jay and Jay alone. That's right, guys. I'm flying solo this week. Mike's hellish work schedule made it impossible for us to get together and record a show. We decided the best course of action would be to just wait a week and do the interview show next week when we could both be there. It made the most sense. It's hardly fair to you guys, though, the dozen of loyal listeners who tune in every week. Some of you have even subscribed, and that's pretty damn cool. The rest of you are assholes. What the hell are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button already. Yeah. So I decided to give you assholes something to tide you over until next week, lest you forget about us. So I'm going to do a low-key short little show, solo here, just to get you by. Now, I know there are certain things you guys have come to expect from the Close Enough podcasts, and I won't let you down. So, here goes. What am I drinking today, Jay? Rum and Coke. How do you make that? You put rum in Coke. Alright, that covers that. Let's see. Movie review time. Fuck movies. Read a book. I just read The Martian by Andy Weir. I've been telling everybody about it because it's fucking good. It's about an astronaut that gets stranded on Mars and has to live off the land. Seriously fantastic. I'm going to put a link to the audiobook in the comments down here. So either read the book or listen to it. I don't care which. Just do it before the Matt Damon film comes out and ruins the whole thing. Alright, let's see. What do we got next? Quiz time. Alright, so I'm thinking of a letter. M. No, that is correct. Okay, so now I'm thinking of a number. Pi. That is also correct. Excellent. Can you recite pi to 1,000 places? No. Correct. What am I thinking about now? Japanese tentacle porn? Correct. Alright, I did very well on that quiz. Mike should be ashamed. Today's show is brought to you by Sita's Sundries. Get your someone special something special for Valentine's Day, like one of Sita's handcrafted beaded bracelets, or geek-inspired dice jewelry, keychains, or chainmail products. Seriously cool stuff here, guys. Visit Sita's Sundries at sitasundries.etsy.com. That's sitasundrys.etsy.com. When I realized it was just going to be me doing this alone, I put out a call for letters from you guys, so it wouldn't just be me babbling into a microphone for 30 minutes, and I received a handful of good ones. I'd like to start with this one from Rosie in Orlando. Hi guys, I just wanted to let you know about a personal decision I recently made. I don't really feel like discussing it, but I want to put my position out there. Please be respectful. This is a really long post, but please read the whole thing. I'm taking the brakes off of my car. This isn't a rash decision, so please listen. A few weeks ago, I saw a car accident. Two people went through an intersection at the same time. Both slammed on their brakes at the same time, and they collided. Fortunately, no one was seriously injured. But then it occurred to me. If they'd just gone through the intersection, they wouldn't have collided. The brakes caused the accident. So I decided to do my own research, and what I found was staggering. Hundreds of people every year are seriously injured by unnecessary braking. One time, I was driving in the snow, and I just lightly tapped my brakes, and it caused my car to completely lose control. My brakes could have very easily gotten me killed. Even more astoundingly is how often brake pads will warp and distort rotors, causing bumpy rides and squeaky wheels. And you know what? I also found that decades ago, brakes weren't even used. People would control their vehicle's speed with downshifting and engine braking. Maybe it's just coincidence, but back when engine braking was used, there were almost no automotive fatalities, and there were never brake-caused car accidents. After doing some more digging, I found a nefarious plot. Mechanics, the very people we trust to work on and care for our cars, get paid to install and change brakes. You might think they care about our safety or our cars, but they're just in it for the $19.99 brake pad installations. So I talked to my mechanic about taking the brakes off my car, and I was disgusted by how poorly he treated me. He accused me of being ignorant when I was the one that looked up how much rotational torque brakes can put on your rotors. He didn't even know how much torque a rotor can take before being warped. He said rotors are designed to be compressed, and that it isn't actually a problem, just completely dismissing me. Then he had the nerve to say that my personal choice had consequences, that it would affect everyone around me. Well, I've had it with him. I'm looking for a new mechanic. The problem is that so many mechanics are paid for by the automotive industry that all of them are insistent about my car having brakes. Most of them won't even look at my car for other reasons, saying that a brakeless car could cause damage to their shop or other cars. What a bunch of bullshit! They just don't like those who believe in alternative braking techniques. Now, of course, big government is getting involved, saying that I must have brakes. that this isn't just about me and that I could hurt people. What happened to personal freedom? What happened to liberty? So all I'm saying is this. Do your research. Don't just listen to the NTSB or Big Auto. I've made a personal decision for my family. We just said no to brakes. We'll be using natural remedies like gravity and putting our feet on the ground to stop. After all, if it was good enough for me when I was on my bike as a kid, it's good enough for my children in my car. Thank you, Rosie. Now, if you're anything like me, you're thinking, what a fucking idiot. Or maybe Rosie's trolling us hardcore. Her message was actually a quote from the website, looks like thespud.com, and it points out with a clever metaphor just how stupid the anti-science and specifically the anti-vax crowd is. In the past month, there was a measles outbreak in California. Over 100 cases, most traced back to Disneyland. Measles. For fuck's sake, people, we were on the fast track to eradicating this disease. For once, humanity was going to make something extinct that actually fucking deserved it. But hippie douchebags and Tea Party fuckwits put aside their differences for this. Screw the white rhino. Measles needs to be saved. Missy in Orlando writes, I've read a great deal of history. You learn to value human life, where we have come from, and where we are now. You read about the triumphs and tragedy that has molded the human spirit. It gets hard, though, at times, because it can be a very painful subject. So many deaths due to war and disease, but that's the nature of all life. Except we have been skirting natural selection ever since we began farming and controlling the environment for our survival. We are no longer nomads, leaving our survival to chance. Farming and animal husbandry have afforded us the opportunity to do more, to focus on advancing. It's easy to forget the law of survival we abandoned so long ago. We think that we are invincible, that we could survive anything. But if you know anything about the Earth's history, you know nothing could be further from the truth. The life we live is so precious, especially here in the United States, where we welcome so many from other countries, either as a visitor or as new residents. And there are a great deal of other countries that are similar. People immigrate to find a better life. It's during these times of travel that diseases have always broken out. Smallpox, measles, cholera, Ebola, the Spanish flu of 1918, the Black Plague, and polio, among countless others, have killed millions, perhaps billions. I have read first-hand accounts of these diseases striking children in the weak, and it's heartbreaking. Dead children ripped from their mother's arms to be burned with other victims. I think anyone should seriously research these diseases they are exposing their children to by not vaccinating them. People think that these diseases are not serious, but that's just not true. Almost 200,000 children alone died last year worldwide from measles, and that is with widespread mandatory vaccines. Imagine if everyone stopped vaccines. That number would almost certainly rise. Maybe we are best going back to the old game. Survival of the fittest. But you have no idea how hard it has been for us to get this far, to be able to prevent these diseases without the slow evolutionary process that makes us able to fight off diseases naturally. Seriously, do the research. If you can stand the sight of suffering and dying children, then you deserve to make your own decision. Thank you, Missy. That was well said. But let's teach the controversy, as the creationists say, and line up our two sides. You could call them opposing theories if you were an idiot and didn't understand what a theory was. On one side, we have a near-unanimous opinion of relevant doctors and mountains of peer-reviewed research stating that not only are vaccines safe, but they're super effective. Just ask polio. And on the other side, we have a spattering of doctors, mostly dentists, and Jenny McCarthy. Full disclosure here, Jenny McCarthy and I have quite a few things in common. We both have great hair. We both run our mouths to anybody who will listen. We will both sleep with anybody if it advances our career, and neither one of us has any medical training. Wait, scratch that. I'm CPR certified. So why the fuck does anybody care what McCarthy thinks? I'm not sure. She has great hair, I guess. Most anti-vaxxers, if you can follow their rabbit trail of anecdote and conjecture, will eventually lead you to the Wakefield Lancet paper, published in 1998. This paper showed evidence for a clear link between the MMR vaccine and a rise in autism rates. It was later discovered that Wakefield was being paid by a group seeking to prove this very fact, and that his data was almost entirely falsified. The paper was partially retracted by the Lancet in 2004 and fully retracted in 2010. Wakefield was later found guilty of serious professional misconduct by the General Medical Council and was subsequently removed from the medical register, which I gather is similar to an attorney being disbarred. So he was not allowed to practice medicine in the UK. So if you actually do the research, you will find that none of it holds water. Not vaccinating your child is kind of like playing Russian roulette. The odds are in your favor that you'll be fine, most of the time. But when your number comes up, you're fucked. But you know what they say. When you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. Our last letter comes from Christina in Ormond Beach. She writes, Some parents want to inoculate their children with religious beliefs and instill fear and suspicion about God's wrath and Big Pharma. Should believers have the right to refuse vaccines for their children? In my opinion, believers have the right, but only if they are childless and agree to be sterilized. Otherwise, no, no, no. Certain vaccines should be required for all children, and the only waiver of the requirement should be a valid medical reason endorsed by a doctor. Disease is not an intentionally evil thing, but refusing to vaccinate a child against preventable diseases is. Parents should be criminally charged with intentional harm of their child if the child contracts any disease that a required vaccination was aimed at preventing. The US of A needs to pass a law that makes a parent's refusal to get vaccines for a child the same as harming the child, so we don't have to wait for the child to contract a preventable disease before we throw the parents in the slammer. Who should decide what vaccinations are required for all Americans? This is a matter of public health across the state borders, so the federal government should decide. The FDA. No, this is not communism. Communism has to do with the ownership of property and labor. No, this is not totalitarianism. We have checks and balances in our political system, and no constitutional right is omnipotent. Freedom of religion is only a constitutionally protected right when the practice of one's religion does not harm others. The refusal to vaccinate is unconstitutional. What decides whether parents refuse which vaccinations? Often it's not religion, but incompetence by another name. Maybe parents can't manage a busy schedule, or maybe they're lazy. We should of course pick the incompetent people out before they procreate, for sterilization. Failing that, however, and failing a U.S. Congress capable of agreeing on a good law, consider this. Last year, lawmakers in California required parents to talk to a professional before they could refuse vaccinations for their child. In the Los Angeles Times, Michael Hiltzik reported a decline in the rate of parent refusals in the last year. He also found bigger declines in districts with the highest refusal rates. For example, Laguna Beach's rate fell from 15.1% to 2% after the new requirement was implemented. The decline in vaccination refusal rates is enlightening. When the smallest obstacle is presented to parents, all of a sudden vaccinations are not so bad. Religious freedom is a poor excuse. Forget all about God's plan and Big Pharma. Convenience is what it's all about. As an immediate course of action, let's do two things. 1. Stop creating the myth of religious persecution around vaccines. And 2. Legislate for parents who refuse to be inconvenienced by vaccines to be inconvenienced instead by a doctor telling them how vaccinations work and what they do. Now that's an interesting take on the topic. Thank you, Christina. It's also interesting that this has become a political topic, like climate change or evolution. Politics have worked their fingers needlessly into the discussion. The neat thing about science is it follows the facts, and the facts are true whether you believe them or not. You can't vote on them. You can either choose to accept them or ignore them, and if you choose to ignore them, you do so at your own peril. I'd like to thank you all for joining me on this scrappy little podcast, and we'll be back next week with a regular show with all the trimmings. If you haven't yet watched the interview, please do so, and feel free to send us your opinions on that movie, or this podcast, or, which Spice Girl you thought was the hottest at CloseEnoughRadio@gmail.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel to make sure you don't miss a single episode of Close Enough. Now, normally at this time, Mike would introduce you to a local band. But if you've been paying any attention at all, you'd know that Mike isn't here, and I have no idea what band he had slated for tonight. It was suggested that I play a Tim Minchin song for you, something like The Fence, but that'll probably get us sued, so I will instead share with you my own amateur rendition of Storm, Tim Minchin's poem about pseudoscience and struggling in the face of ignorance. Here goes. Inner North London, top floor flat. All white walls, white carpet, white cat. Rice paper partitions, modern art and ambition. The host's a physician. Lovely bloke, has his own practice. His girlfriend's an actress, an old mate from home. They're always great fun, so to dinner we've come. The fifth guest is an unknown. The hosts have just thrown us together for a favor because this girl's just arrived from Australia and has moved to North London, and she's the sister of someone or has some connection. As we make introductions, I'm struck by her beauty. She's irrefutably fair, with dark eyes and dark hair, but as she sits, I admit I'm a little bit wary, because I notice the tip of the wing of a fairy tattooed on that popular area just above the derriere. And when she says, "I'm Sagittarian," I confess a pigeonhole starts to form, and is immediately filled with pigeon when she says her name is Storm. Chatter is initially bright and light-hearted, but it's not long before Storm gets started. "You can't know anything. Knowledge is merely opinion," she opines over her Cabernet Sauvignon vis-a-vis some unhippily empirical comment by me. Not a good start, I think. We're only on pre-dinner drinks, and across the room my wife widens her eyes, silently begs me, "Be nice." A matrimonial warning not worth ignoring, so I resist the urge to ask Storm whether knowledge is so loose-weave of a morning when deciding whether to leave her apartment by the front door or a window on the second floor. The food is delicious, and Storm, whilst avoiding all meat, happily sits and eats, while the good doctor slightly pissedly holds court on some anachronistic aspect of medical history, when suddenly she insists, "But the human body is a mystery. Science just falls in a hole when it tries to explain the nature of the soul." My hostess throws me a glance. She, like my wife, knows there's a chance that I'll be off on one of my rants. But my lips are sealed. I just want to enjoy my meal, and although Storm is starting to get my goat, I've no intention of rocking the boat, although it's becoming a bit of a wrestle, because like her meteorological namesake, Storm has no such concerns for our vessel. "Pharmaceutical companies are the enemy. They promote drug dependency at the cost of natural remedies that are all our bodies need. They're immortal and driven by greed. Why take drugs when herbs can solve it? Why use chemicals when homeopathic solvents can resolve it? It's time we all return to live with natural medical alternatives." And try as hard as I like, a small crack appears in my diplomacy dike. "By definition," I begin, "alternative medicine," I continue, "has either not been proved to work or been proved not to work. You know what they call alternative medicine that's been proved to work? Medicine." "So you don't believe in any natural remedies?" "On the contrary, actually. Before we came to tea, I took a natural remedy derived from the bark of a willow tree, a painkiller that's virtually side-effect-free. It's got a weird name, darling. What was it again? Aspirin, which I paid about $1 for down at my local drugstore." The debate briefly abates as our host collects plates, but as they return with dessert, Storm pertly asserts, "Shakespeare said it first. There are more things in heaven and earth than exist in your philosophy. Science is just how we're trained to look at reality. It can't explain love or spirituality. How does science explain psychics, auras, the afterlife, or the power of prayer?" I'm becoming aware that I'm staring. I'm like a rabbit suddenly trapped in the blinding headlights of vacuous crap. Maybe it's the Hamlet she just misquothed, or the 8th glass of wine I just quoted. But my diplomacy dike groans, and the asshole held back by its stones can be held back no more. "Look, Storm, I don't mean to bore you, but there's no such thing as an aura. Reading auras is like reading minds, or star signs, or tea leaves, or meridian lines. These people aren't plying a skill. They're either lying or mentally ill. Same goes for those who claim to hear God's demands, and spiritual healers who think they have magic hands. By the way, why is it okay for people to pretend they can talk to the dead? Is it not totally fucked in the head, lying to some crying woman whose child has died and telling her you're in touch with the other side? It's just fundamentally sick. Do we need to clarify that there's no such thing as a psychic? What are we, fucking two? Do we actually think that Horton heard a who? Do we still think that Santa brings us gifts and that Michael Jackson hasn't had facelifts? Are we still so stunned by circus tricks that we think that the dead would want to talk to pricks like John Edwards?" Storm, to her credit, despite my derision, keeps firing off cliches with startling precision, like a sniper using bollocks for ammunition. "If you're so sure of your position, but you're closed-minded, I think you'll find that your faith in science and tests is just as blind as the faith of any fundamentalist." That's a good point. Let me think for a bit. Oh wait, my mistake. It's absolute bullshit. Science adjusts its beliefs based upon what's observed. Faith is the denial of observation so that belief can be preserved. If you show me, say, that homeopathy works, then I'll change my mind. I'll spin on a fucking dime. I'll be as embarrassed as hell, but I'll run through the streets yelling, "It's a miracle! Take physics and bin it! Water has memory, and while its memory of a long-lost drop of onion juice is infinite, it somehow forgets all the poo it's had in it. You show me that it works, and how it works, and when I've recovered from the shock, I'll take a compass and carve fancy that on the side of my cock." Everyone's just staring at me now, but I'm pretty pissed, and I've dug this far down, so I figure in for a penny, in for a pound. Life is full of mystery, yeah, but there's answers out there, and they won't be found by people sitting around looking serious and saying, "Isn't life mysterious? Let's sit here and hope. Let's call up the fucking Pope. Let's go watch Oprah interview Deepak Chopra. If you're going to watch the telly, you should watch Scooby-Doo. That show was so cool, because every time there's a church with a ghoul or a ghost in a school, they looked beneath the mask, and what was inside? The fucking janitor, the dude who runs the water slide." Throughout history, every mystery ever solved has turned out to be not magic. Does the idea that there might be truth frighten you? Does the idea that one afternoon on Wiki-fucking-pedia might enlighten you frighten you? Does the notion that there may not be a supernatural so blow your hippie noodle that you would rather just stand in the fog of your inability to Google? Isn't this enough? Just this world? Just this beautiful, complex, wonderfully unfathomable, natural world? How does it so fail to hold our attention that we have to diminish it with invention of cheap man-made myths and monsters? If you're so into Shakespeare, lend me your ear. To gild refined gold, to paint the lily, to throw perfume on the violet is just fucking silly, or something like that. Or what about Sachimo? I see trees of green, red roses too. And fine, if you wish to glorify Krishna and Vishnu in a post-colonial, condescending, bottled-up and labeled kind of way, then whatever, that's okay. But here's what gives me a hard-on. I am a tiny, insignificant, ignorant lump of carbon. I have one life, and it is short and unimportant. But thanks to recent scientific advances, I get to live twice as long as my great-great-great-great-uncles and aunts. Twice as long to live this life of mine. Twice as long to love this wife of mine. Twice as many years of friends and wine, of sharing curries and getting shitty with good-looking hippies with fairies on their spines and butterflies on their titties. And if perchance I have offended, think but this, and all is mended. We might as well be 10 minutes back in time for all the chance you'll change your mind.